Hi, I'm Paul Skelton. I'm the editor of Electrical Connection, and we're here today at the headquarters of SAI Global to talk about the wiring rules. I'm joined by an industry panel of experts from the Wiring Rules Committee. I guess the first question is that it has actually been a long time between between editions of the wiring rules. It's been 11 years. Should we be looking at wiring rules more often?
The committee's thought about it for a long time. So probably before we started the last revision. It's a very difficult, it's a two-edged sword. If you're too quick with it, you miss out on technology. There is a process you have to follow. It is a project. So it is very difficult to pin it down to a shorter period of time. Where our hope as a committee is that the next revision will only be a 5-year revision rather than 7 years. So we are definitely aiming for a shorter period of time, but it will still be in the years. And we do acknowledge that it does take a while for this to happen. But just how it has been, and we're trying to change that now.
Historically, it was always 5 years, but it has moved out a bit more. There's been an awful lot of comments in the last one.
Oh, yeah, that caused a lot of problems. Yeah, comments.
That is something that you've mentioned before, Gary, is that there was an unprecedented number of comments during the public comment stage. I think you said about 2,000. So how did they get addressed, and how do they affect the actual process?
The good thing is we had a good, strong project manager at the beginning, where we defined a scope. So we had a scope document. So everyone put their 2 penneth worth into the ring, and we considered what was able to be negotiated, and we came up with a document that said whatever's in this document is what we follow. What is out of it is out of scope, because we had to constrain ourselves to some degree. So when we got the comments, and it was well over 2,000 comments, it was a probably horrendous part of the committee work we had to do. But what we had to do is then go through those comments are grouped, because there's always similar comments. And what we did was we looked at it and made the definitive at that time, this is actually revision or amendment 2, amendment 1. It is not in scope of what we're doing. So we made that definite decision and actually recorded that against the comments. So we actually used that document to create Amendment 1, which was where we're at now.
So how do you decide what's in that scope?
Only because we had to nail it down. The committee, we spent 3 days going through what we thought we should do in the revision, the necessary clarity and technology and all that sort of stuff. And then it was documented and just listed in a spreadsheet. And that's what we had to follow. Unless something came up that was life and death that we hadn't considered, then we would add that in. But we were stuck on that scope. And I think it was a good move because there was a lot of R&D required with some of the things that were deemed out of scope. They weren't things you could just write some words for and put into the book. They needed a lot of background work to actually come up with how this all works and then put it into words. So it couldn't happen in a shorter period of time.
There'd be a lot of people watching this who obviously read the wiring rules, and they obviously know the wiring rules exist. They know there's a committee who put the wiring rules together, but they probably have no idea who's on the committee or who's represented on the committee. So can you just talk us through a bit about who is the Wiring Rules Committee, the L1?
Okay, the 3 guys we've got here today, obviously manufacturers, so we're involved. We have about 30, I think there's 35 members. 6 of those are from New Zealand. The membership is through an association, so it's not just somebody puts their hand up and says, I want to be involved. You have to be a part of an association. We all represent Australian Industry Group on there. We have members from TAFE, from our education institutions. We have the unions are involved, the trades union. Both of the contractor associations, Masters and NECA. We have suppliers to some degree, but it really comes back to we've got consumer advocates as well on there. So we actually cover the broad spectrum of our industry is done through that wiring rules committee. So we do cover every base.
Don't forget those very important
And the
people from
regulators.
Oh, I had forgotten about that. Yes, yes, remember that. They are very important, but and they are, because they actually drive a lot of the change. The regulators, because of they deal with the people on the street as well as the electricians.
And you mentioned New Zealand, they're having about 6 people in the committee. So what role do they have? Because it's not a direct pick up in New Zealand from what's in Australia, is it?
No. They provide us a little bit of guidance where there are some nuances to the New Zealand installation requirements. So they provide us guidance, and where we can try and match our process to what they do, it gets rid of that Australia-New Zealand distinction. So we do that most of the time, but then there are specific nuances that they handle themselves. So in the last revision, we had a New Zealand working group, and they provided the clauses and the changes and figures that were things that affected them only. So, and they come from, again, they're regulators and manufacturers and installers and consumers that are represented.